Startups don't fail randomly. Why does it matter? Because more than 80% of first-time founders fail. Around 63% of tech startups fail within 5 years. Around 20% of UK small businesses fail in the first year and around 60% of them within 3 years. Also, 30 to 40% of investors can lose their entire initial investment. I know this from working with founders and early stage businesses, analyzing startup failure data and spending hours reading the research, books and case studies behind why startups collapse. So, if the same mistakes keep showing up again and again, it makes sense to understand them before you risk repeating them. This was originally a paid webinar. Today I'm making it public for you as a practical way to understand startup failure before it happens to you. We'll start with the data, then look at the most common reasons startups fail, and finally connect those insights via my own framework for spotting risk earlier and making better decisions. I decided to remove some of the content, so here and there you will see my explanations. So make yourself a tea, get comfortable and enjoy the webinar. So effectively I work as a partner, coach, facilitator to support the sustainable growth of my customers. I'm a practitioner and I simply see a lot of startup problems. I see over and over again the same pattern which often leads business people to fail. So this is my practice. To have a more comprehensive view and deeper understanding, I have studied several books, researchers, papers and reports. Today we'll talk about the reasons of why startups fail. So let's have a look at what I found. I have here a few truly shocking facts about startups fails. 10% of new businesses don't survive the first year. First-time startup founders have a success rate of 18%. That means that according to this data, over 80% is not successful. 63 of tech startups fail within 5 years. In the UK, 20% of small business fail in their first year. Around 60% of small businesses fail within the first 3 years. At this stage, you might think, okay, Vitol, but this data doesn't seem to be coherent. The percentages numbers don't sum up to 100. Here we are talking about, 10% in the first year. Here we are talking about 20% in the first year. I promise I will address this issue later on in detail. For now, I would like to just point out that the data are from the different context. For example, here I'm talking about UK, and these data are from USA. By the way, a lot of studies or articles use a catching sentence, 90% startup will fail. And technically, this is true. It's about time. In longer terms, nearly all companies will eventually fail, isn't it? So when I was preparing this presentation, I was looking for the data for, let's say, 3 to 5 years time horizon. And you might think, all right, but the startup was in the business for 5 years, so owners made some money and then decided to close down the business. Not too bad. Well, the problem is it doesn't have to be the case. Look here. 30 to 40% of the cases, investors lose their whole initial investment. More than 2/3 of them never deliver a positive return to investors. So it looks a lot of owners, founders, not only lose the business, but never made a substantial money on it. And that might be even more serious. Data suggests that many business owners are willing to go into debt. And at the end, they will not only not make any money, they might go into debt, be in trouble personally. So it looks there is a strong business case. Before we will dig into it, I would like to ensure you understand this number right. Let's talk a little bit about the data coherency. Different studies on startup failure rates and reasons often show varying data, and this is because due to several factors. The methodologies employed by researchers can significantly impact the findings. For example, some studies rely on surveys or interviews with funders, while others analyze public data or post-mortem reports. That might create some differences. The sample size, selection criteria, and data collection method can lead to divergent results. Sample size, to give you an example, most studies focus on startups which I call funded startups or enterprise startups. Startups which have some kind of funding from the beginning. These startups are in the privileged positions, having access to resources, money, know-how, contacts from the early beginning. Also, the number of people working in such startups is usually bigger than in case of non-funded startups. Non-funded startups are just new companies founded by a dude like you or me, and they're usually in much more difficult position because they don't have access to these resources. They just have the owner, and his or her abilities and limitations define what the company is able to do. To give you another example, a study based on self-reported data from founders may be subject to biases or incomplete information, whereas an analysis of public records might provide a more objective data, but can potentially miss some important failure factors. Definitions can be an issue as well. There is no universally accepted definitions of what constitutes a failed startup. Some studies consider a startup as a failure if a startup ceases operations or goes bankrupt, while others might include acquisitions or pivots as failures. The definition of startup might be an issue as well. What is also worth to say, startup ecosystems can vary significantly across industries and regions. The challenges faced by, let's say, tech startup in Silicon Valley might differ very much from a consumer product startup in the UK. I hope that makes sense for you guys. Studies focus on a specific industries or geographic areas might provide results that diverge from broader, more generalized studies. The timing of the study can also influence the finding. Startup failure rates and the reasons might fluctuate based on economic conditions, market trends, and other external factors. A study conducted during an economic downturn, like during COVID lockdown, might show different results compared to one conducted during the typical period. To obtain a more comprehensive understanding of startup failures, at least in my opinion, it is essential to consider multiple studies. I think that data doesn't have to be 100% coherent. The important thing is they are showing the trend. You want to see the trend, and this is the key basically. So my point is, if different studies show that a large chunk of companies, let's say 60, 70, 75% of startups will fail within 3 to 5 years, that is a problem. Well, the problem for you as a founders. That is a serious challenge which has to be addressed. If several studies show that 20, 30, 40% startups have the problem with a specific factor, that means you might want to look at it to ensure you know how to deal with it when it comes to it. Most likely at some point of the time you will find yourself dealing with a very similar problem. And there is more. I think it needs to be highlighted. Most of this data is about funded enterprises with venture capitalist money, know-how, consulting support, all support needed with money to fund the staff, operations, and so on. If you are not such a startup, I would like to say you are in a much more difficult position. You don't have all these resources, know-how, money, and most likely you are a small private initiative. Maybe you are by your own, maybe you have a business partner, but you are not on this privileged position. I think you need to be even more conscious about how you are going to approach this. So let's define a few things. When I say startup, what do I mean? For me, startup is an enterprise undertaken by an entrepreneur to seek, develop, and validate a scalable business model. So what is a business model then? Business model basically explains how the organization makes money or intend to make money. Business model explains what is the value proposition, what our offering will do for a customer. What problems are we going to solve? What needs are we fulfilling? How we'll create this value proposition? What needs to be done in our company in order to produce such offerings? Then the business model describes how we are going to deliver this value to customer. And finally, it describes how we are going to capture value for our business to ensure we are profitable. I might be a little bit too formal here. I'm talking about what percentage of total sales are we able to capture as a profit? What will be our profit? So that's the business model is about. Based on my experience and on my research, I built a little model which structurized the reasons why startups fail. The model provides things which every founder should think about. I think most of reasons lie in one of the three areas or triangles or a combination of elements from these areas. So we have strategy issues, we have human or people issues, operational issues. The triangle is about why startups fail, but we can easily reverse it. We can say, okay, founder, if you look after these areas, you can increase the chance of your business surviving or even succeeding. So this is my startup fail triangle. Let's talk in detail about each element. I will share some examples to give you understand of what I mean by each corner. Also, I will share some of extreme cases I had a chance to deal with.
Before we continue, one quick update. Since recording this webinar, I have kept developing this framework. Today I call it the Startup Viability Triangle and I have added a link to it in the description below. The name has changed and the framework is more developed now, but the core concept is the same, so this section is still fully relevant. Let's continue.
Okay, so this is strategy angle. I mean by that all strategy issues. For example, the way how the strategy is built. Is it like that? A founder sits down, thinks a little bit, and says it is a good idea. It has to be a good idea. Let's plan the business and execute it. Or maybe it's more like a design style, where at the creative stage a number of ideas are generated, some are selected and tested against the reality. So that's about the way, it might be about the way how the strategy is built. What about the evidence? What evidence is there? There are people who need our offering, and what is the evidence they're willing to pay for that? That might be about growing speed. Do we understand how much we can grow? How much can we scale up?
One of the case studies I cut from this version was about a company that was growing but without enough control over its processes. The lesson was simple: growth is not always proof of business health. If the system cannot handle it, growth can damage or even kill the company.
So, what is the learning here? It might be surprising for you, but growing is a dangerous process and always has to be based on a solid data. Resources are not made of rubber, you cannot stretch them. It works more like in physics. You have a bar of some material, you can apply force and bend it a little bit, but only up to a certain point. If you apply more force, the bar will just break. In the same with a company, you can find a strategy or even a number of strategies how to use your resources better, but that will work only to a certain point. If you want to go beyond this point, well, it's a completely different story. Very often, you need to change the whole company, its structure to be able to do that. So that's about strategy corner. False if you are doing something super novel, there is a risk people are not ready for your solution. And this is an example of the strategy corner. Also, in terms of starting up a company, in terms of startup, the startup can expand too quickly, and it's not only about the rate of growth, which I was talking before. It's more about when you decide to start to scale up. Scaling up too quickly can lead to failure as well. Why? That happened when a startup got good feedback from early adopters, So they decided to invest to grow, but they did not check if there is enough people who are willing to pay for the solution, if there is a market for that. And that is a very sad experience actually. You are able to satisfy some customer target. It works well, so you invest money as you think you can grow, only to find out there are not enough potential customers to support your company. So that is an example of strategy issue. Business environment, it's another example. Small startups tend to ignore the business environment and do not research and observe it enough. So this corner is responsible for everything which explain how company reach its goals or how works on the ways to reach its goals. So we have human team issues. It can be related to individual challenges. For example, a common issue is productivity, ability to organize properly. Many founders without business experience come to the startup world from a full-time job where they work as a part of the system. They had a manager. They always knew what to do. If they didn't, they simple could ask somebody. There was always somebody to speak with. There was always a person to report. Here, they are in new reality. No one tells them what to do. It's not easy to get good advice, so many people lose focus and have a problem with being productive. Another issue which I often see is motivation to start your own business. What I hear often, what people are telling me, they're telling me I want to be my own boss and do what I like. And don't get me wrong, this is okay. But the challenge arises when the person discover that running a business is not only doing what they like, what he or she like. Um, let's say there is a hypothetical lady who loves to bake and she start a baking business just to find out that half of her times is full of everything else, but not baking. Okay, it might be about accounting, it might be about marketing, it might be about selling, delivering, and so on. At some point of the time, she might even discover that she doesn't want to bake anymore. She's too tired, she's burned out. Another human issue, hiring a first employee. Challenging as a wrong choice can literally put the business to the grave. In terms of founded enterprises, Bedfellows is a huge challenge. When you have such enterprise, you are not alone. You have something which is called an extended team. Investors, advisors, partner. So yes, you have access to resources, but at the same time, you need to ensure that everybody in this extended team fits in a way you can build up the business. If not, most likely will fail pretty quickly. This corner is responsible as well for whole issues connected to managing of and dealing with employees, burnout and lack of passion. It can be the issue here as well. A loss of focus is a common problem for founders. And yes, some time ago, I facilitated a one-day strategy workshop with a guy.
The second case study I cut from this version was about an entrepreneur I worked with during a one-day business design workshop. I diagnosed a clear issue. He was trying to build a business for everyone, be everywhere, speak to everybody, and as a result, he spread his resources far too thin. Unfortunately, not long after ignoring that advice, the company was out of the business.
We had a longer conversation, but to summarize it, I said basically, look, this is a harsh market. You cannot work on delivering such a big portfolio of very different solutions because you don't have the resources to do so. You need to focus on a niche where you can pick up one small project at a time. Okay? The project needs to have a reasonable quick return of investment. Then you need to find an investor, deliver a project, make some money, do it again, build some portfolio, like a record of projects, and then you can think about larger projects. Then you can be a partner for a council maybe. When we had the workshop, we work out a number of potential niches. We plan some experiments to validate connected business hypothesis. So we have done some job to help him to move forward. Unfortunately, he didn't decide to follow the advice. He tried to be everywhere to talk about everything. A few months later, he was out of the business because he ran out of the money. So learning, lack of focus can put you out of the business. And I think this is pure example of a human issue. So this angle covers everything connected to a person, team, organizational culture, everything about how people think, how they behave. This is located in this corner. Okay, let's talk about operational issue angle. It is interesting as it does not show up in the research. Most likely it is because most research focuses on founded startups. So the operational aspect in such enterprises can be simply done very well. They simply have enough resources and they know how to do it right. However, from my experience, it is a huge challenge for other smaller startups, non-funded startups. Basically, this corner, this angle is about operationalizing the business. What are the processes? What are the procedures, policies? What systems are you going to use in the business? What are you going to measure? How will it be measured? How will you use this data? So, from my perspective, this is not super complicated, but I know for new entrepreneurs, it can be challenging. I can even share a little story to illustrate the importance of this aspect.
The third case study I cut from this version was about a company with a strong strategy and a business model that had already proven it could be profitable. But it still failed because of weak execution. The operational model was not strong enough to deliver the strategy consistently and to turn the profitable model into a sustainable business.
What are the most common reasons for startup failure? There is a bunch of problems, but some of them seems to be more frequent than others. Here is the top 7, and I got this data from CB Insight report. So what do we have here? Run out of cash, 38%. No market need, 35%. Got outcompeted, 20%. Flawed business model, 19%. Legal challenges, 18%. And pricing cost issues, 15%. Also not the right team, 14%. So that is the top 7 reasons why startup fails. So I'm going to apply the startup fail triangle and try to analyze the data we got. Then I will share some of my thoughts with you. Also, I'm going to offer some open questions which might be helpful for you. So every time when you have a reason, when you have a single factor which makes startups to fail, we will ask, is it about strategy, or is it about people, or maybe it's operational level issues? So let's talk about it. Let's ask these questions for the first reason. Is it about operational problems? Do they lose the cash flow because they had the problem of organizing a system of keeping things under control? Or maybe it's about people. Is it about people who didn't have the experience or maybe right habits to do the financial stuff regularly and properly? Maybe it's about strategy. Maybe that's the strategy issue, the business model issue. Some of them could simply underestimate the amount of money which is needed to keep business going. And this is fairly common mistake when people make decisions based on ideas rather than facts. When they don't test their ideas. They don't have a good data to build forecasts, so it's more wishful thinking rather than forecast. They simply don't fully understand what money is needed to keep business going, especially in the time of growth or scale up. It might be also about the time needed to get going. Again, if one doesn't test ideas, it is very easy to face the situation where the business is not operating at the right scale to be financially sustainable, and at the same time the financial resources are going to run out. To be clear, we don't know, the study does not provide detailed information, but the startup fail triangle can still give us a good point to think about, to prepare ourselves better. No market need. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy because that means more than 1/3 startups fail to find out the most basic issue, customer need. 1/3. Let me repeat it. 1/3 startups. You might say it is really about strategy. Fair enough. But is it only about strategy? From my experience, basically it is all about people. At the beginning, at least. It is about a bunch of psychological mechanisms which make founders think they are going to conquer the world without any evidence. And then it is about strategy. Well, lack of strategy in this case. So please ask yourself now, how do I know there is a market for my solution? How do I know there are enough people who are willing to pay for my solution? What is my evidence? And be dead honest about it. If not, you might easily join the 1/3 group. Loved business model. Quite general, isn't it? It suggests it is not mainly about operation. It is more about strategy level issues. But this is like one layer of reality. For me, such a thing is always a people issue as well. Why? Because a business model is always created by people. People, founders, usually are responsible for creating and testing the business model. It is not only about thinking of how we'll do things, it is acknowledging our ideas might not be the best ones. It is about creating experiments to test if our ideas work, and learn, and test again, and learn even more before we're ready to develop the business. Actually, both topics, business models in itself and business model patterns, as well as process of experimentation in the business, are the topics for the separate training. So yes, strategy, yes, okay, sure, but for me it is also people issue. Got outcompeted. This one is interesting because outcompete possible means A, founder did not research the competition because, well, whatever. Lack of understanding of the importance, being too focused on own creation rather than reality check. B, choose a good spot, potentially profitable, but with low entry barriers. So it was easy for a larger company with greater resources to come, get the market share and scale it up quickly. Potentially do it better as well, but for sure quicker than a startup. And I believe there is a lesson to be learned, for sure. Do you ask yourself, who am I competing with? Where am I with my offerings regarding their offerings? Did you ask yourself where I am, strategically? Are my offerings innovative? If yes, okay. Is it easy to copy my business model? If yes, how to prevent it? It is important questions. You can invest a lot of work to quickly find out somebody made the money on your idea and you are out of the business because simple they can scale up quicker than you are able to do. This one is interesting as well, and presumably it applies to more innovative startups which are developing ideas in areas which are not fully regulated by law. Don't get me wrong, I'm not selling I'm not saying it is illegal. I'm saying the founders spotted opportunities where, for example, emerging technologies create some opportunity, and these areas were not regulated yet. So for me, it's definitely a strategy issue. Mapping the business environment is one of strategy activity, and legal factors are one of the element of business environment. Learning here is relatively easy. If you are doing something fairly regular, just understand the legal requirements and comply with it. If you are doing something very innovative, well, this is a very different piece of cake. A good solicitor is an obvious minimum. But to add some my experience and to share some thoughts with you, if I had to advise you something, I would say be integral, be fair, communicate with your customers honestly about things you are going to do and about things you are not going to do. So give customers full details about advantages and disadvantages, and then let people decide what they would like to do. So that should help you to deal ethically, which can minimize the risk of operating in the gray zone. Also, as additional advice, I would say have a clarity which elements of the legal aspects you need to observe and do it. Dedicate resources to do it, to understand how the law is changing, and have a plan B how to react to it. Cost versus income. Well, that's always tricky. Pricing is also often a challenge. I think it is mainly a strategic concern. While building the business model, you need to combine, different aspects together and make them coherent. You have the part of the business model which is responsible for value creation and delivery, and that generate costs. And there is a part connected to income streams. So that allow us to answer the questions about value capture. How much value will we capture? How much money will we make on this business model? What is the relation of cost to revenue streams? How do the costs change in relation to scale? And this question is key question, I believe, as the ratio of this element is not linear. Business model tools which I use every day give you the flexibility to arrange a company in a different way. To achieve your goals, you can choose different business models. So that's why it's worth to work on a few business models at the same time and basically choose the most profitable one. Pricing cost aspect is also tricky, and it's often this is something super objective. It is not about what you can do, it is about a business reality. So as a founder or entrepreneur, in certain situations you can do very little, and this led me to human people aspect, as many founders fail to recognize the complexity of these issues. They simply hold a belief they they will make they will make a ton of money without thinking where strategically am I, in what value chain am I, what is the typical profitability in such a chain, where is my niche, how can I open um, more profitable niches, what changes do I need to develop in my business model in terms of serving these niches. You remember the case which I was telling you before. To serve the new very profitable niches, we had to deploy very different sales model to be able to deliver the value to this niche. So there is plenty of things which needs to be considered carefully in order to do not fall into that reason. Not the right team. What does it mean? Well, we don't know. But let's apply my tool and see what we can try to get from it. People aspect, well, obviously it is a people issue. A recruitment issue maybe. The question every founder should ask himself, do I know who I am looking for? I'm not talking about technical competencies only. I'm talking about soft competencies, about recruiting with this cultural fit in mind. How will we know somebody fit us? Do we have clarity about our values, beliefs, which are, important for us in the company? Do we know how we implement these values? In other words, what behaviors are well seen and what are unwelcome? How we will explain this to new people? How we work here, how we are going to explain them what is the way, what is the code of conduct in our business. Strategy issue, it might be this is not obvious. Often when you have clarity about the business model, about the strategy you need to execute to succeed, you need to realize you can do it efficiently only with the right organizational culture. That means you look for a very certain kind of people who can execute efficiently your business model. Let me give you an example. Think about different business models of Amazon and Google, and think about their organizational cultures. Think about what we read about these companies in the news. To say that diplomatically, Amazon culture will be more focused on productivity, when Google is well known for creating physical and mental space for employees to do their own thing. Two very different approaches which allow the execution, which allows to execute two different business models. And now imagine transplanting Google's people to Amazon to run the Amazon business model. Could it work? I don't think so. So learning here for you, or questions maybe you need to ask yourself, is, do I know my business model? If yes, what type of organizational culture do I need to promote? What values should I promote? What behaviors are desired in my company? All this in order to execute my business model efficiently. And let's talk about operational aspect quickly, as well, you might not see this aspect at first glance here. From my experience, business people say sometimes, I don't know, maybe a team is not working as a team, or maybe some people doesn't fit, or whatever. Basically, they are suggesting that something is not good with the team, where the reality is some of their team members are struggling because of a poor operational model. So basically, they don't have a chance to give 100% for the company. So the question which is worth asking is my operational model right? Am I talking about, and here, to have a clarity, I'm talking about systems, metrics, procedures. Is it logical, coherent, realistic, easy to maintain? Do I provide training, supervision, and support to ensure my team understand what to do and how to do it? So I think this area, not the right team, in reality touches all three angles in the triangle. Yeah. So, all right, there is a few things to be thought, isn't it? And when you survive the first month, there is more to follow. Okay. We talk about many of things, reasons, and data, startup facts, and you might think now, oh, there is plenty of things to think of. Yes, it is. Entrepreneurship is an intellectual activity. The bad news is when you get these things right and you survive, I don't know, the first year, the second year, the third year, there is plenty more to come. The diagram, which you can see right now, has been developed by Greiner, so we call it Greiner curve. It shows potential challenges to be faced by growing organization. So here there is a age, basically. Here is the size of organization. In this case, organization grow up in size over time. Obviously, this is a hypothetical scenario to describe challenges of growing, and it's based on a solid scientific research. So on the beginning, we have a creativity stage. Entrepreneurs who founded the firm, the company, are busy creating products and opening up markets. There are not many staff, so informal communication works well. People wear many different hats and fulfill different roles. But the first crisis comes, crisis of leadership. Why? Because professional management is needed. The things cannot be approached on you go anymore. Organization overcomes this crisis, and when they do it, there is the growth to direction stage. So growth continues in environment of more formal communication, budgets, and focus on separate activities like marketing and production. So organization starts to be more professional. Then comes crisis of authority. Management experience problem to monitor organization because the organization simply is going to be too big to do it with previous systems. And managers, founders cannot make all the decision that needs to be done, needs to be made. So the decisions and authorities needs to be delegated, and this is always a big challenge. So let's say that the organization overcome it as well. So there is the stage growth to delegation. So top management is less involved in daily activities. They can focus more on the strategy. Common issue here is to create policies and channels of communication. And when organization still grows, then crisis of control appears. So usually here at this stage, some sophisticated head office is needed. Usually here the senior management needs to look at the different parts of the business, at the separate parts of the business, and needs to ensure they work together. So that's the real big challenge, and when it's overcome, there is growth to coordination stage. At this stage, usually new policies and procedures are introduced to bring structure to different parts of organization. But this processes creates a bureaucracy with strict systems and procedures. So that creates another crisis of red tape, where bureaucracy, gets burned. If organizations survive this crisis, there is a really nice place to be, growth to collaboration. Bureaucracy is replaced by a new culture of collaboration, where leaders use a good judgment and emotional intelligence to make decisions. Formal control lets go, and systems are more flexible. This stage is limited by crisis of internal growth. Future growth can only come by developing partnership with complementary organizations. So opportunities to future grow are outside of the organization. And then there is alliances. The organization is dealing with challenges with partnership with other organizations, and that at some point of the time might lead to crisis of identity, when organization needs to refocus on mission, values, and strategy. So that's the challenges of growing up. Oh, sorry. Yeah, all right. So challenges. It is never-ending story. You have been warned. I have a final bunch of questions for you. How to anticipate the crisis so that you can prepare everything you need to overcome them easily or avoid them altogether. Is it possible to easily jump from the creativity to growth to collaboration phase?
That is the main idea I want to leave you with. Startup failure is usually not random and it is rarely caused by one clean mistake. The same patterns keep appearing in different combinations, and that is why it is worth learning how to recognize them earlier. The challenge is that as a founder or someone directly involved in the business, you might not be able to see all the symptoms clearly. You are too close to the company, too close to the decisions, and often too busy solving daily problems. That is why it can be valuable to have someone like me on your side, a second brain who can think with you about your business, challenge assumptions, and help you look more clearly at your strategy, people, and operations. As I mentioned before, I have continued developing the framework you saw in this session. Today I call it the Startup Viability Triangle. You can find the link in the description below. And if you are working on an early stage business and want help looking at your own risks more clearly, you can also find a way to contact me there. Thanks for watching.